everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. So in today's video, I'm going to show you a technique using Gilding Flakes, but this time with your embossing folders. Now, I've got a couple of embossing folders here. One is a 3D Impresslit from Sizzix, and the other two are just standard 2D embossing folders. But I'm going to show you how we can use these with Gilding Flakes. So I'm just bringing in my non-stick mat. I've got a scrap piece of white cardstock. I've got my Phat Foam, which I'm going to use with my Flitter glue. And basically what you do is you turn this Phat Foam into basically like an ink pad. So we're going to load it up with some of the Flitter glue, which is like a tacky glue, so it won't dry. And then I'm going to use a pallet knife to just push that into the foam. So we really are just turning this into an ink pad that we can then use with our embossing folders. So you don't need too much glue, but just enough to cover the foam. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to effectively ink this panel of cardstock up using the Phat Foam with the glue. So next I'm going to bring in my Gilding Flakes, and I'm still using the IndigoBlu chocolate box Gilding Flakes, but I don't have too many left. And when you've used them quite a few times and you tip any excess back in the box, you do end up with really small, tiny fragments of flakes. And it's these that I'm going to try and use up today. So I've tipped all those fragments onto my panel and I'm just rubbing those in with my fingers. And then once I've done that, I'm going to remove any excess using the Scoochy. But I had missed a few areas on the panel. So I'm just going to ink it up again with the glue. Again, cover it back over in the flakes. Rub them in with my fingers, and then bring in the Scoochy, which is like the abrasive sponge, and just get rid of any excess from the top of that. And then I just come in with my e-cloth just to kind of dust it off and make sure that there's no loose, dusty bits left on the panel. And as you can see, you get this really lovely shine. It almost, in some places, looks like matte gold, and then in other places it's really shiny. So all I'm going to do with this panel now is pop it in the Impresslit, run that through my die cutting machine, and then you get this beautiful embossed and die cut butterfly. It's really, really pretty. I did make another one in preparation for this video, and this one I used a few more of the flakes rather than the leftover bits, and you see you get a slightly different polished look. So the next technique, I'm going to use this text embossing folder. Now this is just a 2D embossing folder. It's non-branded, but if I can find a link, I'll pop it in the description box below. And I'm just running it through with some Pink Frog watercolour cardstock. And now I've got my Phat Foam again. I'm just going to add a little bit more of the glue, the tacky glue, to the sponge and rub that in with my palette knife. And then what we're going to do is basically, it's similar to like if you were embossing heat embossing on a panel. I'm just going to run that foam over the top of the raised bits very gently. All we're trying to catch is the raised bits with the glue. You can do this with embossing powders using your embossing pad, but we're just going to try it using the Gilding Flakes and the Flitter glue here. So I'm going to add a few flakes, and then I'm going to add a few more of the bits that I've got left. And again, it's the same technique. I'm just rubbing it in with my fingers, getting rid of any excess flakes. And then once the panel's covered, I'm going to bring in the Scoochy, which is the abrasive foam, and just run that all over. And again, we're just going to repeat this over the panel until we've removed all the excess flakes. Any leftover bits I am tipping back into my box of Gilding Flakes to the side of me, and then I'm just going to run my e-cloth over it. Now, you don't get a really polished look with this. It is a little bit patchy. It's very kind of vintage, but it still gives a really lovely effect. And I'm going to use some shimmer powders on this panel. So I've got these two shimmer powders here. Again, I'll pop links to all these products in the description box below if you're interested. But I'm just going to add a little bit of that over the top. And because we use watercolour cardstock, I can spritz it with water, and the powders will spread really well in between the raised embossed bits and the depressed bits. So I'm going to pop that aside to dry once I'm happy that I've got a good coverage, and then we'll be able to turn that into a card later on. So for our first card, I've just got this top folding A6 card blank, and I've got a slightly smaller panel of white cardstock which I've run through the embossing folder, the text one, and I'm just going to add some foam tape to the back of that. Once I've peeled off the backing tape, which I didn't think you'd want to see the whole process of that, I then just attach it to my card blank, And I'm just going to add a little bit of glue, the Nuvo Deluxe glue, to the centre of that butterfly, and then just attach it in the middle. I like to be able to keep the wings so that they've got a little bit of dimension. I'm adding a little bit of thin foam tape to the back of this sentiment, and then I'm just going to attach that to the bottom of the card. And that's the first card. And I'm going to repeat that same process, but using the Blossom Embossing folder here. And again, for the second butterfly, just to keep the cards nice and simple, because really the focus of this video is the technique with the Gilding Flakes. And it's nice to be able to then, when you've used a technique, to be able to just make nice, quick and easy, simple cards that really show off that technique. So again, I'm just going to add some glue to the centre of that butterfly, and then add some foam tape to these sentiments. These sentiment strips are from Funky Fossil Designs. They're from the Strip Back Sentiment Stamp Set. I'll leave links again in the description box below. So the embossed script background that we made, I've cut that into two so that we can get 2 cards out of it. And I've got a strip of gold cardstock that was left over in my stash in a scraps pile, and I'm going to add some glue to the back of the embossed panel, attach that to the gold panel, and then attach that to a custom made black card blank. I'm using the Nuvo Deluxe glue for this. And once that's adhered down, I've got a couple of Sizzix wildflower stems. These are the Tim Holtz ones. They were in my die cut stash pile, and I'm just going to attach those to the front of the card. Again, I'm just adding a little bit of Nuvo Deluxe glue on the back of those die cuts and attaching them down. And then I'm going to mount the sentiment on a little bit of foam tape and just pop that in the middle of the card. And then that's the third card finished for today. So for the fourth card, I've got a 6x6 shop bought card blank, so it's slightly smaller than 6x6. I've got this piece of black cardstock which I'm going to attach in the middle, and I'm using the Kalal glue for this, as these are bigger panels. And then I've got a piece of plain white cardstock that I've embossed with that text embossing folder, and I'm just going to attach that there as well. So I've got another strip of this metallic gold cardstock from my scraps pile, which I'm going to use. And again, I'm just mounting the embossed panel to the gold panel. And I'm going to pop some foam tape on the back of this just to give it a little bit of dimension and add a little bit of extra interest to the card front. So once I've attached that and removed all the backing paper, I'm just going to add it slightly off center on the front of the card. And once I'm happy with that, I'll press it down, and then I'm going to bring in a sentiment and a die cut butterfly from my stash. I think this butterfly die came with my Big Shot when I first bought it. It was like a starter kit inside. It's a really nice simple butterfly, and I've got a few die cuts that I keep in a box for when I'm making cards. So again, I'm just going to add a little bit of glue to the center of that butterfly, and then I'm just going to attach that to that card panel. For the sentiment, I'm going to add a little bit of foam tape again to the back of it, and I'm just going to attach that to the bottom right hand corner of this card. Now I've got these enamel dots or adhesive pearls from Hobbycraft, and I'm just going to attach a few of those to the top right hand corner and the bottom left hand corner. I'm just going to add 3 at the top and 3 at the bottom just to finish off this card. And it just adds a nice finishing touch to what is a relatively simple card front. So thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope that you've enjoyed watching this video and that this technique has given you some ideas. Of course, you could use it with your embossing powders and an embossing ink pad, but it's just another way of using up some of those leftover fragments of your Gilding Flakes. So I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more of my videos. And I'd really appreciate a comment being left in the box below. Let me know which one is your favourite and if you'd give this technique a go. So thank you again and take care.